when it comes to the original translations, and again, I'm not a Bible person. I know very little about the Bible as far as what you guys would ever think of it as a Bible person. I just know general stuff. But I have done Bible reads with friends of mine where I've looked at different variations of the Bible, the NIV, the American Standard, the King James Version, and the wording is so different to have very vastly different connotations. And that's the problem with language. Language is sloppy. And I think that if God exists and he's giving this information to people, I would expect there to be changes because it filters through a person. As soon as you have some kind of corrupted source, and man is fallible, I think that even a non-believer would accept that it has to have imperfections in it to some degree. Are those imperfections something explainable? Could you do an internal critique for hermeneutics or whatever? Sure, I don't have an issue with that. But RTB claims it is scientifically inerrant. And I think that, to me, is actually a mistake. I think that by them doing so, they're saying, hey, look, there cannot be any scientific errors. Even if those errors are only in the original translation, they still promulgate throughout time. And like, for example, with the ant thing that you mentioned, right? Let me actually get that exact passage. I got it here somewhere. That's the one you wanted to talk about. Well, basically, it says the ant. I don't remember the passage, but you can find it for me.
I got it. It says it's Proverbs 6:6-7. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Yep. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer, or ruler.
Yeah. Right here. I have it, Proverbs 6:6-11. Now I found it. But yes, and then also, another version says it has no queen. Which we know it actually does have a queen. We also know that worker ants are very amazing what they do. As a matter of fact, if people wanted to argue, hey, there's some kind of intelligence in some of these creatures, it almost seems to be the case. I don't know if you've ever seen the video. You have ants going down one side, and you have termites going down the other side, and they have barricades in between of ants going this way and termites facing this way to act as a barrier to protect their troops. These are learned behaviors, right? These are things that are, through evolutionary things, which are still pretty amazing for their small little minds that they have, right? I wouldn't even call it a mind, but brain. But instinctually, they know about these things. So to say that they're a sluggard and not wise, to me, seems counter to what we actually know scientifically, that ants do have a commander. They actually do act as army ants, right? I mean, we see these types of behaviors, and so we know scientifically that statement probably doesn't make much sense. Now, do I consider that a scientific error per se? Again, this is what they thought at the time, not realizing that there was a lot more complexity to ants than what they could just observe, probably, just from top level. I mean, as soon as you get down to the ant farm and you see how the queen is treated, and there is a kind of a ruler, it changes the whole dynamic of that.
Yeah, well, see, to me, when I look at this passage of Scripture, I see this as, again, an accurate characterization of ant behavior. And, to me, the issue isn't with Scripture; it's actually with the how we are understanding what science is teaching us about the structure of ant colonies. Yeah, there is a queen in an ant colony, but the queen's only role is twofold. One is to establish a colony originally, and then she lays eggs. And of course, she's cared for by the workers because her success means the success of the colony as well as the success of the species. But she's not actually commanding the ants in terms of how to behave or what to do. This is all instinctual behavior, and it's absolutely mind-boggling, what ants do, what termites do, what these social insects do, without question, right? But I don't think it's not true that the ants actually have an overseer. And so that's actually a correct statement, because the queen isn't giving instructions, but the connotation of the word queen is that this is an individual that's dictating the actions of others. And this is not the case for an ant queen. She's not doing that. And so this is, again, to me, I don't see a scientific issue with this particular passage. And in fact,
well, one could argue she does chemically, right? They do communicate through chemicals, right? I mean, one could argue that the queen is kind of giving out directions, chemically speaking. I mean, even the workers give out chemical to each other, right? So they say, "Where's the food?" Well, here's this chemical path.
Yeah.
Follow that, right? And they tell each other through the antennae, "Hey, go this direction." What their language
sure,
is.
They're communicating through a variety of means. Most of it is probably through chemical communication. Sure. But again, the queen is not telling the ants what to do when they go out and forage. They're doing this again instinctually. And the point of the passage of scripture is really to say to people, look, you should be a person that is industrious, where you go off and it's instinctual in you to do hard work without having somebody overseeing you, that you do it on your own accord because that's part of your character, that's part of your nature, versus somebody that works hard because there's somebody that's overseeing them, that's forcing them to do the hard work. So it's that's kind of the admonition that's coming through Proverbs. So it's placing the ants actually in high regard. These are remarkable.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, it's saying, hey, look, the ant, according to the proverb, the ant doesn't have anybody telling what to do, but it still knows to, hey, have provisions, right? Especially in the summer.
Yeah.
Which is where they usually come out, because I can tell you where I'm at, that's where we get ants, is during the summer more than any time else.
It's telling the lazy person, it's like even ants know how to do that. And I don't know, Fuzz, I think you make a really good argument there in the fact that we think of queen in the royal sense and giving directions, but if the ant queen, you're right, isn't necessarily giving commands and directions, she just lays eggs. And so I think that there's a good argument there. But Steve, to your argument about that it's not a problem for you if through cultures and all of that, translations, perception that people might have made errors. Let's get to the last one, because this isn't just people. This is God incarnate. This is Jesus himself that makes a comment about the mustard seed. And so why don't you get to that one as our last one? And again, reminding folks to make sure to give us your questions for the guys, and we'll take those on right after that.
All right. Well, I mean, the Bible in a couple places, Mathew 13:31, starts to mention that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, and it's a parable that Jesus is using, obviously, to compare the quote kingdom of heaven to a grain of a mustard seed, which is again, the Mormons actually use a very similar thing, that faith is a mustard seed, and then you cultivate it and it grows into a great tree, which obviously is scientifically inaccurate because the mustard does not form a tree, but. The two things that obviously make that incorrect is, one, it doesn't form into a tree, and two, it's not the smallest of all seeds. I think the smallest is actually an orchid or something. And so my argument would just be that Jesus himself, saying these categorical type statements, puts a different level of authenticity to what we're supposed to take away from the Bible as far as a scientific claim. He, to me, is making a scientific claim when he says something to that effect, as the mustard seed is the smallest, does go in, I don't know that thing for a tree, and becometh the tree. Those are incorrect statements, no matter I don't know how you want to translate it, because I don't know what the original translation was, or the original source was. But you're talking about the words of Jesus, and I think that's an issue that to me stands out more than some of the other stuff that I brought up earlier.
Yeah, well, this is where we want to be paying a lot of attention to the context of the passage, and again, even the original language. So for example, here, this is a parable, as you pointed out, where Jesus is trying to communicate to the people that are listening to him what the kingdom of heaven is like, and he's using agricultural examples because these are agricultural people. And so one way you could look at that, when he says, well, the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, you could just see that as hyperbole, right? Where, hey, this is the smallest of all seeds. But as I've read some commentators who have gone through this passage in the original Greek, they point out that what Jesus is saying in that context is that the mustard seed is the smallest of seeds that you would be working with for agricultural purposes, and when you read that passage, it does talk about those seeds that you would sow in the ground. And so that's the point, is that this isn't the smallest seed that has ever existed, or that, the smallest seed, botanically speaking. It's just, this is the smallest seed that you work with when you sow seeds in the ground, and that the plant that grows up is not the mustard plant that we are familiar with as an herb. It's actually a mustard tree, which is called the toothbrush tree. It's indigenous to Iran and probably was imported into Palestine, and it grows in arid regions. And it becomes a very, very large tree that is as wide as it is tall, with all these massive amount of branches there. So Jesus is making reference to the mustard tree, not a mustard plant. So when you look at that passage, I don't think there's a scientific error there, because it's, again, in the context of the agricultural practices of the people that were listening to him. Well, so it would be the smallest seed that they would deliberately sow in the ground for agricultural purposes. That's what the point that Jesus was making there.
The problem I have with the hyperbole thing is that Mathew 13:32-1 says, and I'm going to quote this, which indeed is the least of all seeds. That is more of an absolute type statement. Now, I'm not trying to do any kind of weasel words or anything like that. But when you say indeed, you take it out of the realm of hyperbole.
Yeah, but when you continue with the passage, it says, I'm reading the NIV here. It says, though it is the smallest of all seeds, when it grows, it is the largest of the garden plants and becomes a tree. So again, he's talking about those seeds that would be used for agricultural purposes. He's not making, again, a statement that this is, the smallest seed that ever exists. And I mean, if he brought up the example of an orchid, that wouldn't work very well, because A, they would have no familiarity with an orchid, and B, orchids don't get very large, compared. So, it's a parable where he's speaking, I think contextually about what they would be manipulating agriculturally speaking. So I just don't see this as a scientific error at all.